You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hey, all you music lovers out there, and welcome back to Modern Musicology. Welcome back to a brand new year of Modern Musicology. My name is Alan, and I am here with my groovy co-hosts, Stephanie Seymour.
Groovy, baby. Happy New Year.
Rob Levy.
Hey, how's it going?
There you go. Oh, my God. And Anthony Williams.
Hey.
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 So it's been a little while since we've been together because we took a little break for the holiday period. How was everybody's holiday this year?
Lovely. I'm so glad I had a break, but I am glad to be back and rocking in the new year.
It was great. Took my girlfriend to London, had a wonderful time. And, coming back to the US has been rough. But
Yeah. Yeah.
As it always is.
It is.
I stayed home and unfortunately added about 900 books to my to-be-read music book stack and listened to way more music than I should have.
All right. Well, this week, this is the start of a brand new year. This is January 2026. And of course, we have a very big event that starts off every year, and that is David Bowie's birthday, followed 2 days later by his death day. And this year marks the 10th anniversary of his passing, which just boggles my brain
Crazy.
like nothing. So we have a very special guest that's going to be joining us in just a few minutes to talk about a book that he's got out and talk about Mr. Bowie and his legacy and his career and all that kind of stuff. But before we get into that, Stephanie and I are going to give us some listener feedback.
Yeah.
So some of this comes from our last episode, which was our Christmas episode. And the first email that I've got here is from our buddy, Bill Lamond. He says, I highly recommend Susan Greenbaum's You're My Holiday. And he thinks that's the album title anyway. And he caught her live and only had cash enough for one CD, but that's the one that he bought. The holiday CD I have also has the wonderfully fun and educational Looking for Hanukkah, all about the struggle she goes through every year getting the dates right because it goes by a lunar calendar instead of, like it falls on the same day every year. Like
I feel
Christmas
your
does.
pain.
And also it has the song, the title song, You Are My Holiday, about how she loves sharing each other's holiday traditions with her non-toxic Christian husband, who also plays drums in her band. Those two songs I know can be heard online. Do check out the visuals in the music videos on YouTube. And he says, thanks always for being such good company.
Oh,
Thank you. It's so good to hear from you.
love that.
And he also sent us a drawing that he had done for Inktober. Well, and I'll share that with you guys so you can see it too. But it's really,
cool.
really good. So thank you so much for the email and for the drawing, Phil. And Stephanie, You've got one.
I do, from my awesome friend Raleigh Araneta, who says Phil Spector's Christmas album is awesome and that he has a near mint UK pressing on the Beatles Apple Records, which is pretty cool, I think. That's awesome. Yeah. Also loves the Pretenders 2000 Miles that I mentioned. And he says he rocks to both Chuck Berry's and Keith Richards' versions of Run, Rudolph, Run, and also Elvis Presley's bluesy Merry Christmas Baby. He does go into a story about meeting Isaac Hayes in Central Park around the time he was signed to Virgin, which is where I was actually working at Virgin, and he loves Mistletoe and Me by Isaac. And then lastly, he said his favorite Christmas song was John Lennon's Happy Christmas, War is Over. And he says, unfortunately, this song is still relevant today because there's always a war going on somewhere in the world during the holidays. And sadly, that is true. Thank you, Raleigh, for writing. Love you.
Absolutely. After that, to kind of wrap up our year, I did a couple of posts on our socials The first one was a graphic with kind of a list of our top 10 episodes from the past year. And two of those people that were included in that list responded. Chris Coker, who was the author of the Kinks book, wrote, awesome. Awesome. Never underestimate Kinks fans for tuning into stuff. He was actually our top listened to episode this past year.
Yeah. And
then another one, Matt Alschbach, he was in two of our episodes from the year. One was the Ozzy retrospective, and one was about the Billy Joel documentary. And he says, fantastic. Thanks for the opportunity and for the excellent work you and the crew put into every episode. Oh, thanks, Matt.
Love you, Matt.
And then after that, I posted our top 10 ever episodes from our past 4 years, basically. And our second highest rated episode ever is our first interview with Gary Clark about the music that he wrote for the film Sing Street. And that inspired our good buddy, Eric Sensava, to write a story for us. So Stephanie, give us that.
Yes. Eric says, hey, I got a fun fact for you that I don't think I ever told you. He said, a few months after your Gary Clark episode, I had an unexpected free afternoon and had made a previous note to watch Sing Street based on what I heard on that episode. It was a delightful film and right up my alley, and a lot of fun to see how the Irish filmmakers treat coming-of-age 80s themed movies, which is really not much different than the U.S. It's true. Even though that was well over a year ago, probably 2, I can still remember Drive It Like You Stole It. Love that song. He said he's not seen Flora and Son yet, but just remembered that he has Apple TV, and that's where he's going to check that out, which is a great movie also. My goodness. Yeah,
I remember us really enjoying that one.
Mm-hmm.
So highly recommended.
Yeah.
And hopefully we're going to be having Gary Clark on again hopefully sometime this year, because the musical that he's been working on for the past couple of years with Emma Thompson, the adaptation of Nanny McPhee, they were shooting for having it debut this year, 2026, and they're hoping for a West End debut. So, and we told him, as soon as Nanny McPhee is out, we want to have you back on. So hopefully that will happen later this year.
Exactly.
And then Eric also shared a screenshot of his Spotify Wrapped, which shows us in his top 5 podcasts for the year.
Nice.
And tells us that this is the second year in a row that we're in his top 5.
Love you, Eric.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eric. It's so great to hear from you.
Well, thanks to everyone who took the time to write in. And, we love hearing from everybody. So please, if you have some feedback, just write us at modernmusicology1@gmail.com or leave a comment on any of our social media platforms. We love you.
Right on. And we always appreciate our listeners. Thank you all so much for tuning in. It's amazing. Okay. So as I mentioned at the top of the show, this week we are talking about Mr. Bowie, because we have just passed the 2 days. There's this period of about a week that Bowie fans refer to, since it happens right after Christmas. We refer to it as Bowiemas, and that encompasses the week that includes his birthday, which is January 6th, and January 8th, and his death day, January 10th. And we have a very special guest that's going to be joining us on this episode. This is author Don Cleese, who has a book that's out called David Bowie, Every Album, Every Song. And this book covers the years 1983 from Let's Dance all the way up to his final album, 2016, which was Black Star. So, Don, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to our show.
Thank you all for having me. If I may interject before we get into things, Sing Street is, for the benefit of your listeners, it is a brilliant film, and it's so sad. There are so many casualties, shall we say, of the pandemic, and the Broadway musical based on that film, whose production got delayed, is just tragic, because I've heard the cast recording from that, and it is so good, as good if not better than some of the versions in the film. And it's a great reminder of why we spend our evenings talking about music like we're doing right now.
Yeah. Good point.
Okay, so since we are recording this on January 11th, yesterday was the 10th anniversary of Mr. Bowie's passing. And first of all, I just can't comprehend the fact that it's been 10 years already. But since we're at that point, and since we're kind of like marking that anniversary, Don, where were you and what was your reaction when this news came out?
You know, I know that the anniversary is obviously yesterday, but for me, the day it hit me was today, 10 years ago, because
Wow.
I literally, I remember it's a Monday morning that I basically just fell out of bed when I heard the news, because I had my kids had to wake up early to get, my kids to school and stuff. And I heard that news, and I could, what's that Beatles line? I heard the news today, oh boy. And that was the one. And I've never been more stunned. I mean, I'm old enough to remember John Lennon's death, and that affected me, but not in the same way, because Bowie was the figure who I experienced his work, so much of it in real time, and
Right.
and to then have that, and including the times where he wasn't working, that almost 10-year gap in from 2003 or 2004 rather through 2013. And it was like nothing else. I mean, as much as I joke about, we joke only, well, it's a half joking about how the world has kind of collapsed in the intervening decade. But I think that moment, I think it's, I can't think of any other artist where you had the juxtaposition of that amazing piece of work, and then them just being gone, and the idea that there'd be nothing else. Not that, I mean, obviously, well, we'll probably get to that, but I mean, there's stuff that's come out since then, but that extinguishing of all the possibilities in a moment where Bowie's possibilities seemed limitless. I think that juxtaposition is part of why I think it's so hard to take. It's still, it's a very deep psychic wound, for lack of a better term.
That's a great way to put it. It really is. It's hard to imagine that he's gone, even though it's been so long.
Yeah, and I think too, people didn't really realize the cultural resonance of him outside of music, probably until right after he passed as well. And I still think that it's still happening. I think people are discovering more and more just how much he did and what his creative output was.
Firstly, I want to touch on Stephanie because it's been so long.
Oh my gosh!
I had to get the Cat People reference in there. Yeah, it's so surreal that it's been 10 years. It doesn't feel like it. It feels almost like it was yesterday. And I think Black Star in particular is testament to that. That album feels still very fresh 10 years on. And to me, when I listen to it, I still think it could have been released last year, and this could have been a year ago.
Oh, yeah. So since we started at the end, let's go all the way back to the very beginning. Don, how did you first discover Bowie, and how did you get into Bowie, and what was it about his work that drew you in?
Well, this is not the cool answer by any stretch, but while I was aware of him, and I was lucky enough to live in the early 80s in a town where the local cable system had MTV. So of course I saw his work and I was aware of it. I have to admit, the song that kind of clicked for me was Modern Love. And that song, led me to my stepmother's beat up copy of Ziggy Stardust, and to so many other places, and so many other songs. And, since then, again, I guess I kind of came on board, I say I joined with him sort of in real time. And for me, that real time moment is really from 1983 to the present. And so from there, from Let's Dance to Tonight to Never Let Me Down, albums that I know are not, shall we say, beloved in greater Bowie circles, but for which I certainly have an abiding fondness. Through the 90s work, through the Renaissance with Heathen, to the strange, seemingly final words after Reality, and then this amazing 2013 to 2016 Renaissance that was, I think we can all agree was cut a little too short, or way too short even. And all of that I experienced in real time. But again, for me, it started with just an incredibly catchy pop song in 1983, which
I have to tell you though, Don, there's the show I just saw, the David Bowie tribute Sound and Vision show at the Cutting Room. They do it every year. And our friend Tony Levin, who has been on our show before, was playing bass. It was just insane. As always, it was amazing. But the opening song was Modern Love. And it was just like, boom, smash everyone over the head with an amazing pop song. I mean, it might be, one of his, I don't want to say cornier, but it might have been one of his more commercial or whatever, but it's an amazing song. So nothing to be
It is. Yeah. No, it's fun. And it's fun, of course, and we think of Tony Levin, we think of King Crimson, and of course that brings us to Adrian Belew. And so if you want to do a 6 Degrees of David Bowie game, of course, you can have a lot of fun with, so many. Well, just think, when you think of all the progressive bands that Bowie connects to that way, that gets you into a whole other area of things. You think of Rick Wakeman playing piano on his songs and all the stuff with Adrian Belew. But yeah, I'm envious of you seeing that show. A friend of mine was also seeing it, and I saw the Black Star Symphony that Donnie McCaslin has been doing. It performed at what I will still continue to call the Kennedy Center, regardless of any other circumstances, back in 2024, with Gail Ann Dorsey and John Cameron Mitchell among the guest vocalists. And that was just an amazing thing. And seeing, obviously, Gail Ann Dorsey was there and Donnie McCaslin was there. And I can kind of wrap my head around what some of those songs must have sounded like. And again, truly envious of that.
Come up next year. I told Alan, I told all the guys, everybody make the pilgrimage to New York and we'll all go together.
I know I need to. It's, I think the only thing that stopped me is I need to actually come up for for a work thing, later this month. So I was like, I can only do but so many trips, alas. But no, truly envious. And I think some of these tributes, I think tribute bands or tribute acts are one of these things that has gotten a bad rap. But with Bowie, I think when people really try to showcase the breadth of the work as this show clearly was doing, based on the set lists I've seen and the artists involved, it really is a whole different thing, and a reminder that we, not to make knee-jerk assessments, if anything else. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about the book a little bit. So this is part of the On Track series, and your book is every album, every song from 83 to 2016. What was the starting point for this book, and how did you approach writing, researching, all that stuff?
Yeah, this is the third book I've done for this publisher, Sonic Bond. The first one I did, and bear with me because there's a rationale behind the story. The first book I did was actually about Bob Dylan's work in the 1980s. And, there again, that's an artist I kind of hit at a certain time and have experienced his work since then in real time. And like between Bowie and Dylan, I think while they took very different paths and there's a lot of probably far more differences musically than there are similarities, I think that what links them was the fact that these are two artists who had both established very strong reputations by that point and decided, for various reasons to, again, they went in very different directions, but they they made the records they wanted to make in that time. And while my head can look at those things and very analytically and say, well, yeah, not really their best work, my heart also recognizes that is the point where I jumped on board, and there was something about that music that made me a fan. And so in the same way that I looked at Bob Dylan's work from that time, tried to get under what is it about it that made me a fan, certainly with Bowie's work, again, I was a fan from Modern Love and Let's Dance onward. I went with that. But part of what, again, animated both of those books was what I would call a sense of purpose. It's not just the name of one of my favorite songs by the Pretenders. It's also the fact that if I'm going to spend a very long time writing a book about something, I needed there to be an animating principle underneath. And for me, the world doesn't need more books about why Station to Station or Ziggy Stardust or Scary
Monsters. I was going to ask you that.
Thank you.
Great album. Those, we all kind of take it as read that those are great albums. For my money, Station to Station is Bowie's only perfect album, and that maybe that's a topic for another time. But I think when you look at these other works, they're dismissed. Some of them are dismissed so. Again, it's a knee-jerk dismissal of so many of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not, and I say this in the introduction of the book, I'm not out to try to convince anyone that Tonight is some lost masterpiece. And I'm not out to say that Outside is the equal to his 70s work with Brian Eno.
Even though it is.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, that's right. That's it's there's, that, again, different conversation. It's yes. I think there are song by it's obviously it's the most ambitious thing they did. Outside is definitely the most ambitious thing he did with Eno, and I think that's what sometimes gets lost in the sauce. But the point I was trying to make is that we only look at that these things are only dismissed in part because of the shadow these other things cast before them.
Yeah.
And at a certain point with a great artist, you have to look and say, well, you have to try to take that that monolith, that let's call it 1970 to 1980 monolith out of the picture. What does the what does the ground look like if that 1970 to 1980 monolith is not casting its shadow there? And what you end up with is a body of work that most artists would make Faustian bargains for. There's not one album from first off, across Bowie's whole career, because I don't want anyone to come away thinking that I'm disparaging against Station to Station or Heroes or anything in there. But there's not one album that you can point to a fantastic song on, something absolutely worthy of Bowie's reputation. Yeah. And that's what I wanted to bring out. And I think I wanted to just say, for the people who maybe, look, a lot of people jumped on with Let's Dance and that was it for them. And look, that's cool. But a lot of us stuck with it through, for decades to come, through thick and thin. And that's what I wanted to speak to.
I mean, I think it's so hard for artists who have such a massive career like that, who really have such a insanely genius early period, to have then to even be accepted by fans, that want to have their ears open for newer music. I don't, sometimes there's just no spark there, but in Bowie's case, that's certainly not the issue. Absolutely. He has he's got incredible work in the years that you cover in the book.
And let me just say why I appreciate this so much, because there are 8 billion books written about David Bowie, and most of them focus on the 70s. Many of those focus on the early 70s, going up to Ziggy. And if a book includes anything after that, it's a footnote or it's the last third of the book, and all that other stuff is just kind of like crowded in at the end because Ziggy is the quote unquote interesting story. Well, I happen to love the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. I love all of that stuff pretty much equally, but it's to the point where I kind of almost resent the Ziggy stuff for overshadowing the later stuff that I love so much, and particularly the 90s. I think that Bowie's 90s, and I've said this before on our show, I think that his 90s is just as creative, just as challenging, just as forward thinking and outside of the box as his 70s stuff. And I just get to the point where I guess, you know, I love Ziggy. It's a great album, but come on.
Yeah, look, I think too, Black Tie White Noise is great. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh yeah,
you're just you know, please go on. I apologize.
No, you're fine. I mean, I think a lot of his sort of cultural reevaluation of that time began with The Next Day, right? Because suddenly that record is not just big with Bowie heads. It's a smash at college and commercial alternative radio, right? So I think that's sort of the start of the renaissance of reevaluating him. But I think the stuff in the 90s was great because I think at some point he realized that, one, he could do whatever the hell he wanted. Two, any artist in the world that he wanted to work with, he could pick up the phone and work with. And I feel like that those records have a sense of empowerment in them, right? That is much more structured and rigid and not sort of like, I'm going to change and zig and zag, right? I think his changing styles and changing producers and the way he did his work at that point is all much more planned out and methodical than the 70s stuff. And I think that's what makes his career really interesting at that point. And you also see him much more articulate about things. You know, when right after Let's Dance comes out, he's talking on MTV about there's not enough black artists on MTV, right? He's involved with Live Aid. He's involved with, you know, lots of other charities. You know, he's actually helping independent filmmakers. He's the guy that David Lynch picks up the phone and says, I'm stuck on an idea. What do you think? I mean, he kind of, I think, realized that he's David Bowie. And I think that's sort of the beauty of that time with him.
And Rob, I think it's really interesting you mentioned The Next Day, because growing up in London, I was always fascinated with fly posters, right? You know, the guerrilla marketing technique. They put up a poster in a window of a disused store. And I don't remember seeing anything of Bowie's from probably when I'd have been old enough to recognize it, Black Tie, White Noise, through reality. But suddenly the next day around London, I remember visiting home and seeing so many fly posters for The Next Day. And it really felt like there was a big marketing push. Bowie was suddenly, after 10 years away, relevant and hip again. And, you know, I think I agree that led to this reevaluation that then culminated with 10 years ago, Black Star.
Well, at that point, he was not going to be doing interviews. He was not going to be doing performing. I think the marketing was the push for this thing. And then they dropped the first single completely as a surprise. No one knew that it was coming. And it was a huge, huge bomb that just drops in the middle of the world. And I think that all this marketing comes because Bowie is going to remain reclusive.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. So, Don, let's talk about this era. So, do we want to break it down by decades, or what do you want to do? Because there is a lot of stuff here that your book covers.
Yeah.
Let's start with what do you think of the? Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No. That's it. That I think it's one of those things. If to quote from Bob Dylan, if I thought about it, I never would have done it, but right. I did do it, and it was. You know, it's amazing to think of. I certainly didn't come. I certainly, you know, it did not diminish my love of his artistry, and that's maybe the best thing I could say about the book. I think anyone would come away from it sensing that. And yeah, I mean, I think we just come away thinking every decade, every record, every project, there was always something that was just amazing about it. And you can look at it any way you want, but I'm guessing you have a particular filter in mind to assess that.
What do you think are the 5 most important records from this era, from 83 to 2016? What are the milestones? What are the ones that people should, if they want to understand Bowie in this era, where should they go?
It's funny. I've done a fair few podcasts and such about this book, and I will say right now, and even though I was kind of warned about this question, that is the hardest question I've been asked because 5 songs for a single decade of him is tough enough.
It can be, I say records, so it can be singles or albums, whatever you want to do.
Well, okay, yeah, fair enough.
It gives you a little more leeway.
Yeah, I think that for the 80s, I think that look, Let's Dance is a masterpiece. I'm going to borrow Pauline Kael's comment about the Orson Welles movie Citizen Kane and say it's a shallow masterpiece, but that's not really a disparagement because I love Citizen Kane and I love Let's Dance. It's not a work that aspires to great depth, but it is absolutely the album that David Bowie wanted to make. I think that's what gets lost in all the conversation about Bowie's work post Scary Monsters. That there wasn't someone holding a gun to his head saying you had to make this pop album. It's what he wanted to do. I mean,
yep.
You read the interviews with Nile Rodgers, and he's like, I thought I was going to get to do some crazy record with David Bowie, but he wanted a hit. And he's like, well, I made him a hit because that's what I do, but I would have loved to have done the Crazy album, and so there's that, certainly, but yeah, I think it's probably better looked at from the album standpoint. I think that when you get into the 90s, it's a little tricky because my head wants to say Outside because that was clearly his most ambitious album from that standpoint. And that was him, I think, really trying to make good on all of the sort of the conceptual boldness that had always kind of been there as a subtext in albums, whether it was Ziggy, whether it was Station to Station, or Scary Monsters. And he just said, let's make that subtext into the text and run with it. And, so you go there. He then, that's an album that obviously, kind of put him back on the map for a lot of people. I think that was sort of viewed as the real return to form. And look, it's an album I love. It's got one of my very favorite, probably the song. There's what's the lyric? Ain't there one damn song that can make me break down and cry? Well, for me, that there are many of those songs, but Everyone Says Hi is far and away that song for me. And I think certainly as an example of Bowie finally deciding he can, in a very real way, that he can just be Bowie again, that Bowie is his genre and he's just going to run with it. He remakes genres in his own image. He decided he was the genre and said, well, I'm going to go with that. And I think we're all the better for it. And then, I'm going to say those last 2 albums, each in their own way, because it's funny because I remember saying to someone that how the Next Day is kind of it's almost sort of the channeling of the Changes One Bowie into a record. and
Yeah.
and that's a little that's more simplistic than I like to get in these things, but I'm going to run with it. And then, Black Star is, to me, Black Star is almost, I think, his follow-up to Station, his 4 decades removed follow-up to Station, as far as incorporating all of those, turning all those somewhat esoteric influences into an amazing piece of popular music. And so I would run with that one, because just in the same way that Station to Station has the undeniable accessible hits in the way you have with Golden Years or Wild as the Wind, for that matter, you also have the very dense, kind of off-putting, if you're not in the right frame of mind, epic track, epic title track. Black Star offers you much the same elements, pleasures for some, I'm sure detriments to others. Certainly, Black Star, puts you in a very deep mental place in the same way Station to Station does. Dollar Days and Wild as the Wind, it's, I think, both in terms of a piece of, obviously Bowie wrote the one but not the other, but his vocal performance is indelible in both cases. So I think you can, look at those works. I think for me, Black Star really is the just a culmination of those experimental elements in his work that it's I don't know if it's perfect in the way Station to Station is, but it is damn close.
It's damn close. Okay, I'm going to ask you my most important question.
Okay.
I want to ask you about one album in particular that fans seem to hate. I actually love it, and I want to know, am I wrong? Or is everybody else wrong? Is Never Let Me Down as bad as everyone says it is?
Well, the 2018 version is as bad as everyone says it is, because that should never have been done.
I have things to say about that.
Yeah. Sorry. The as I alluded to earlier, I have a great fondness for the album. And Never Let Me Down, look, it's the album Bowie wanted to make. And one of the things that I found writing this book and writing about albums, some of which Bowie himself has been dismissive of, disparaging of, pick your adjective here. But what I found interesting is you look at some of the comments he makes after the fact versus what he said at the time, and then you try to reconcile all that with the truth. I also wrote a book about Fleetwood Mac. You want to talk about trying to reconcile different viewpoints and the truth. That was a fun exercise too. But as much as Bowie has wanted to kind of diminish that album in the decades that passed, it was almost, there was almost 30 years between its release and Bowie's passing, that it's the album he wanted to make. Like, you can parse all his comments all you want and say, and you still wind up with the fact it's the album he wanted to make. He wanted to make a loud rock and roll album that would sound great in stadiums. And having seen and by the way, enjoyed the Glass Spider tour, he did it. He did what he set out to do. He may have had regrets about that path in the aftermath of it, but he still did what he set out to do. And there are definitely songs that I find dicier than others. I'm no great fan of 87 and Cry. I can't fault him for
love that song.
But that's different strokes,
Exactly.
But look, I don't love Too Dizzy. I don't begrudge him trying to pretend that never happened. But then I
Right.
also look at a song like the title song,
Oh my
and I look
gosh.
at Day
I
In, Day
know.
Out, and especially Time Will Crawl, which I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
is as good as any. You know, again, if I said I could find on every Bowie album from, you know, post Scary Monsters,
Yeah.
however much it's disparaged, I can find at least one song that is every bit worthy of its reputation. Time Will Crawl is absolutely that song for me. I remember, I don't know how addicted MTV or accessible MTV was to all of you here when it was out.
Very.
But I remember in '87 when he was announcing the tour, and he was instead of doing the traditional press conference, he decided to have his band with him and play songs instead. And one of the songs he played was Time Will Crawl at one of those press conferences, and MTV showed it. I'm like thinking, okay, yes, I think this is for me. This is, you know, this is a version of Bowie I'm on board with. I like the loud rock and roll music. And by the way, I cannot listen to the song Shining Star without kind of getting a little misty when he sings, I can make you, you know, I can make you happy every goddamn single day of your life. Like that, you know, I think that I feel bad in a way. Look, I shouldn't pity these, you know, well-paid musicians and all that, but the people who did that rework of the album, who I'm sure had the best and most loving of intentions, but I think they also missed the point that it was the album that their friend wanted to make, and for all its faults, for, you know, the '80s production that maybe hasn't dated as well, it was still the album David Bowie wanted to make, and I think he was, and honestly, I think I'd like to think that at some point that Bowie himself would have come back around and realized that a song like, you know, Zeros, that his sense of humor was actually coming through on that song, and that the appropriate amount of anger was coming through on a song like Day In, Day Out. Yeah. And, you know, and that Bang Bang was exactly as lewd as it was supposed to be. You know, we'll never know.
Right.
Yeah,
but
I think for me, when I listen to that record, I treat it like it's a lot of the other Bowie records I heard. It's like, well, I don't get this now, but he's so far ahead of me anyway that I felt like it's not a bad record or it's not awful. It's just I haven't caught up with him yet. And I think that was an amazing gift. And when you listen to his records in the 2000s and the 90s, you sort of feel like, I'm not catching up to this yet, but oh my God, it's great. The drum and bass record, it's fantastic. People, when it came out, had no idea what was going on with it, much like we got with the record you're talking about. And now people love it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, all of them, again, Earthling. I mean, actually, Earthling is one where I have a hard time deciding what my sort of ideal song on that is. I mean, I like, if you catch me one day, it's Dead Man Walking. If you catch me another day, it's probably Looking for Satellites. But, you know, but Battle of Britain gets a word in. You know, there's you know, so much in there. I mean, I think, you know, it's funny because Outside is the album I actually have the hardest time being objective about, in a way, because I saw that tour. I saw one of the shows on the tour before the record came out.
Oh, wow.
And so it was, to me, it was absolutely new territory. And I don't, and that was, it was the third time I had seen Bowie live. And I don't think I have ever seen him, certainly not him, and possibly no artist ever, more captivating than when he performed the title song to Outside. Like, I mean, I wish I could send that emotion, you know, through the microphone, through the camera, to explain just the impression that made on me at the time, because it was just amazing. He wasn't, you know, he hadn't even added Under the Pressure into the set yet. So he was like, there was the closest things to a hit at that point was, I guess you could say, Scary Monsters, maybe stretching a point, Andy Warhol, but like it was, as far as older material, he went deep into the catalog, which is great because I saw the show in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and let's just say it's not the most progressive part of the country, and back then. And I saw the review in the local paper, and they were disparaging. I'm like, well, they clearly did not see the same show I did, because what I saw just absolutely, it's far and away my favorite time seeing him, because to me it was the fulfillment of the promise with when he did the Sound and Vision tour, and he said, you know, there is debatable about how serious he was about, I'm never going to play these songs again. But it was certainly it was the last time he was promising to play those songs again. And by the way, it was fun to see the Sound and Vision tour too. I loved seeing Ashes to Ashes. I loved seeing Rebel Rebel.
I love Ashes
and not
to
knowing
Ashes.
if I'd ever see them again.
You know, I think Ashes to Ashes
so
was like the first video of his I ever saw. Speaking of MTV,
Me too.
Had to be,
It's
and that's
haunting.
so memorable.
It's the most haunting video.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, yeah. And so but I think the fact that he had done that tour, and he had he had done what Jacob Marley had failed to do, dropped off his chains, and so he was then free to pursue the directions he wanted to, and what he did. So, and what direction did he pursue? He said, I'm going to do half of my new album that nobody here has heard, and I'm going to do the most, esoteric stuff from my backlist possible. And it was definitely not a show for everyone, but again, it was a show for me. And so, and for me, I think of hearing him do Teenage Wildlife, and I think of him doing Joe the Lion or Jump They Say, which I know was a hit in the UK, but sadly made no impression here in the US.
Right.
And to me, that was the show that just reminded me that this was a guy. I think I'm sorry, I can't remember which of you had said this about how back in that 90s period, just having that consciousness of the fact that, hey, they're David Bowie, they can just do whatever they want. And this was a Bowie that I saw at again in Chocolatetown, USA, of all places, that could do whatever he wanted, and it was just amazing. And I will never forget that. Again, I talk about wanting to send it through the microphone and through the camera and all that. It's the thing that when I've talked to my kids about David Bowie, and I don't think they're fans like I am, although one of my kids did go with me to see the Black Star Symphony, so that was cool. But
nice.
That's a regret. I regret that he had stopped touring before I could go see him with any of my kids. And if I could, I wish I could channel that moment and that experience of seeing that artist in such command of their gifts. That's the thing I just wish that I could convey. I think when I think back at it now, that's probably as much as anything what I hope that someone who read this book I did about Bowie's later work would understand, that through it all, what made me want to write this book was the knowledge that irrespective of however his records sold or didn't sell, or what song was played on MTV or not, that ultimately you had an artist who was in command of an amazing set of gifts as a singer, as a writer, as a musical presence. And when we say we'll never see his like again, look, I'd love to be wrong on that. I'm sure we're right. I'm sure we won't. But good Lord, if we are wrong about that, and may we be wrong about it, can you imagine what kind of artist that would be to exceed that? I think that would be, I'd love to see it in my lifetime. I don't think I will, but you know, as prideful as I am, I certainly would love to be wrong about that, because because what Bowie gave us is just that great.
So I'm curious, when you got sort of going with the book and sort of the word of mouth came out that you're doing this, have you heard from a lot of sort of, I guess, what we would call music journalist academics that were like, oh my gosh, this is great? Like Alan kind of alluded to some of this earlier, but did you get any feedback on your topic? And also sort of, did you feel more of a responsibility to tell that story because that part of the story hasn't really been told in a fair way?
It's interesting. I mean, I think I'm kind of, the advantage of being a kind of low profile individual is that you don't have people knocking on your door. I think there's definitely people I know, musicians I know who, it's very funny. One musician I know is actually writing something specifically about outside. He's like, and he said, and it's someone I've known for, I don't know, 30 odd years, said, I don't want to read your book yet because I'm working on this thing about outside. I'm like, okay, John, it's cool. Just, if you want me to look at anything, that's good. But no, I think it's, again, I think that what has been nice is that people do recognize that this period, this, post Scary Monsters period really is worthwhile. And it's something that should be dug into, and it's a shame that some of this didn't happen in his lifetime, and that's but of course that is also par for the course for a lot of artists, I guess. But it's but certainly I know that I kind of felt for myself, just personally, the pressure of it, and writing this book, while I had a day job, by the way. It was, it took me a good, probably all in, 18 months or so, plus various edits and, plus, time after that to do, edits and such. It was, I definitely did feel a certain degree of pressure. I mean, pressure because it's something that's obviously close to my heart, and something that I would hope that a person reading it would get I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Would recognize the inspiration, I guess, for lack of a better term, that I got from these records to want to write about them. To want to put these words down, and yeah, I think, and I did feel, again, responsibility, because it is such a lesser discussed period of time, and again, I think it's important, and it's funny. I'm probably a bit. I'm sure my wife would probably say I'm a bit of a contrarian, and she's not wrong. But it wasn't, and that's the thing I want to say. This was not out of any kind of contrarian viewpoint, because again, I'm not disparaging any of the records that came before. It's really just about wanting to say, let's just give these later works a fair shot, because they probably didn't get them. And
yeah, that's one of my first impressions of this book. Is that, like, I was just so glad somebody wrote about something different, and something that hasn't been covered, because you're right. How many times do we need to read about, like you said, Ziggy, although I love it and I'm not disparaging any of that. Like, that's amazing, but
right. Yeah. Like, if you ask me my favorite, Bowie songs overall, there's going to be, at least a song or two from Ziggy on that list. It's totally. There's no disparagement there. It's really just about wanting to
shed light on something that hasn't had the light shed on it. Yeah.
and I think also sometimes as I think sometimes you know, I mean, again, you know, Alan and I share a couple of fandoms, and sometimes those fandoms can be you know, not the most accepting of certain you know, certain viewpoints, and sometimes I think you want to say to people also, hey, you know, look, you know, if you like this, you know, particular record, you like this, you know, particular episode of a TV show, whatever, that's great. You know, like what you want to like. And that's the thing I always say. Like, people should enjoy what they want to enjoy. If it's, you know, and because I've got very little patience for gatekeeping. You know, that's I'm you know, it's funny. You know, it's funny because in some ways I'm probably, you know, at the prime age for wanting to do such things with various artists, you know, movie series, TV series, whatever. It's just so silly. Like, just, you know, let people enjoy what they want to enjoy. You know, just have fun with it. Just, you know, if someone becomes a David Bowie fan because they happen to, you know, because somebody sent them the video for China Girl, great. I think that's awesome. It's a cool video. You know, like, let's just all, you know, enjoy this artist. I think who was, you know, and one of the things too, like I don't get a lot. I tried not to get too much into the, you know, kind of the personality of it, because that's always a fraught thing with any famous person. You know, I think I tried to, you know, give a fair viewpoint of a person who, like, again, the person who shamed, browbeat, whatever you want to call it, MTV into recognizing that they were not playing artists of color like they should be. I do mention that in the book. I tried not to go again too deep into that, you know, because we never know these people for sure. You know, I'd like to believe he was, you know, a good person. There's a lot I hear about him that says it was. I didn't want to go down that route. I really wanted to keep it focused on the music. Having said that, one of the things that will always stick in my mind about David Bowie goes back to the Live Aid concert, and how when they needed a few minutes to show a video about the impact of the famine, that Bowie, you know, is the one who said, yep, I'll just give up one of my songs because I want this to be shown.
Yeah.
We've talked about that on the
and that changed the course of the amount of contributions coming in.
Geldof, who, you know, Geldof, who was, you know, for all his flaws, is probably my one actual hero in this world. You know, he is always credited Bowie as that's what really melted down the phone lines. It was having that video out there. And you know, and again, something I do write about in the book was about how Bowie agreeing to come on board the concert when he did, that the credibility he gave the show by saying, I am part of this, I am definitely part of this, was that did help bring in other acts and help make the thing happen. I've always thought one of the amusing things is, you know, while he was doing it, you know, while he was rehearsing it, part of why he was available to do it is because he was in London shooting Labyrinth at the time. So there is a kind of a fun juxtaposition of the fact that it was his sort of world-beating entertainer instincts that to do Labyrinth that also enabled him to do this most amazing charitable thing in his life and work, which in some way, just to me, feels like a great summation of the artist, that, you know, that he did ultimately, that he wanted to, he ultimately wanted to do right by people and by the world, I think. And that's,
Yeah.
I mean, that's, I think, part of why he appeals to me so much. And
Right. Well, all right. We're just about at an hour. So we're going to take a very quick break. We're going to take a 30-second ad break. We're going to be right back because we've got a little bit more Bowie to talk about. So don't go anywhere. I'll be right back.
Come listen to the 42 Cast. It's your ultimate answer to fandom, geekiness, and everything, and you can only find it on the ESO network.
Okay, we are back. Stephanie, you mentioned this a little earlier in the show, but you saw this show on Thursday night on Bowie's birthday, January. Tell us about the show and that concert all, because it sounds amazing.
It is an amazing experience, and I think everybody should fly into New York and see it if they can, because it's a yearly event, and they're doing 4 shows this year. It's called Sound and Vision. It's at the Cutting Room in New York City, and I had been before. My friends had invited Bob and I, and we went 2 years ago. We couldn't go last year, but I think they've done it 4 years in a row so far. The people who are playing in the band are all people who have played with David in the past. This show had an incredible lineup, just of a million people to mention. Standing out were, of course, Tony Levin, bass player extraordinaire, friend of our show. Mark Platty, who has played in and also produced Bowie's some of his work. Jim Boja was there, J.J. Appleton, Gail Ann Dorsey, who, by the way, Don, you were mentioning, let me think of the song. Sorry, 1 second. I'm going to get it because I have the set list here. Gail sung Dead Man Walking. I mean, she sang a lot of things, but when she sung Dead Man Walking, it was just like everybody, their breath was taken away. And I just want to say something about this show. It's like the spirit of all these people who love Bowie so much. It's such a positive experience to be in that room. It's fans feeding off the music, feeding off the musicians, feeding off the fan. It's like this giant circular positive energy vibe. And it's like that for every song. And they even said that this year, like in the time that we are in this world, and the troubles and the really, the hard times and depression and anxiety that so many people have right now. Like they even said, we need this as much as you, because it was such a give and take. You could just feel it in the air. It's such a special show, and I really do encourage people to go see it when it comes around next year, because this is, I believe, the last night. It sells out every time, by the way. So it was incredible. And the song list, I mean, they did 2 sets, everything from Ashes to Ashes. Like I said, they opened with Modern Love. They went from Suffragette City to Let's Dance to Station to Station to Heroes. Closing out with Heroes, by the way, which they do every time. Amazing.
That's amazing. So when you get tickets next year, just get one for me and I'll fly it.
Okay. Love it.
Keeping in mind that this is, again, around the same time as my partner's birthday. So,
I know.
I may get in trouble for this, but we'll see.
Good luck.
Yeah, I know. So thank you, Don, so much for joining us for this. Tell us a little bit about where people can find the book and how people can follow you.
So the book itself is available via Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com. Sadly, not in the Barnes and Noble stores, at least not where I live, but definitely via their website. Folks in the UK can also find it. If or other places where Amazon exists can certainly get it there. I'm on Instagram at DP Cleese. That's DPKLEES. That's like Steven, or S like Starman, if you prefer. And the again, the book again, David Bowie on Track, 1983 to 2016. Forgot what century we were in. I apologize. And it's also, just if I may plug slightly, I've got books about Bob Dylan in the 1980s and also Fleetwood Mac in the 1980s, for people who really want a story that cannot be easily told from one viewpoint. And although Bowie probably trumps them all when you think about it. But yeah, thank you very much for having me. Again, this was a book that came from a place of real just love for this work, and I'm glad it's out there in the world, and while today again is always for me going to be a sad day, I'm also reminded of the people who cared enough to ask me how I was doing, who knew that this work meant that much to me.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what I think part of what makes Bowie special is that he was the artist who inspired those deep feelings. He's not what we consider sort of an emotional out there singer-songwriter, but he obviously inspires such strong feelings in so many of us. And I'm glad that we haven't lost that, even in these dangerous times.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right, Anthony, where can people find you?
Well, as always, you can find me on the Watchers in the Fourth Dimension podcast, watching our way through all of Doctor Who from start to finish. We are currently in Peter Davison's final season, and you can, of course, find us in all the usual places that you get your podcasts, whether that's Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple, etc., including wherever you're listening to this one. And if anyone wants to follow me personally, I am on Instagram at Englishman in ATL. All
right, Rob, lay it on us.
Okay, folks, take your protein pills and put your helmet on, because this is this is what you need to know. So first of all, you can find me online on Facebook and Instagram and Blue Sky under my name. You can also find me on Louder Than More Radio on Mondays from 6 to 8 Greenwich time, or 12 to 2 Central on Louder Than More Radio with a program called Antics. And then Monday evenings from 5 to 7 p.m. Central, or 6 to 8 Eastern, you can find me on the Face Radio from good old Brooklyn, New York. And then Saturdays, two times on Saturdays on Eardrum Buzz Radio, I host a show called The Comforts of Madness. You can listen to that. All of those are streaming. All of those are archived at the websites for those particular places. And starting in February, you'll be able to hear my ancient archaic radio program called Juxtaposition on Community Radio, STL, or Crystal. And you'll be able to hear that there as well.
The revival.
Yay.
Okay, Steph, it's a brand new year, and we're going to start it off with a success. I know you can do this. I have faith in you. Let's go.
You made me laugh. All right, you can find me at Stephanie Seymour Music on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram at there_r_birds. And you can find me on Spotify and all the streaming platforms, and you can find me on Bandcamp under my name, Stephanie Seymour. That's me.
Ooh, look at that. I knew you could do it. And you can find me at cosmiccreative.com, KOZMIC creative.com, where I have just released 2 new Doctor Who books called Time Flight, and it traces the whole history of, selectively the whole history of Doctor Who from 1960 all the way up to like 2 weeks ago. And it covers the TV show, it covers the audios, the comics, the novels, plus all the other crazy stuff that was going on at the time, like webcasts and the very first Doctor Who convention and the launch of Doctor Who magazine and all these kind of things. So it's all in one big timeline across a 2-volume set.
So exciting.
And I am currently in the works on my very own David Bowie book. And I'm shooting for next January to tie in with, and it might not be January, it may be later in the year, but it's going to be next year to celebrate his 80th birthday.
Wow.
And this book traces his career across 80 songs.
Oh, wow.
So, yes, I'm excited about it.
Really cool.
I've gotten a
Excellent.
pretty good bit of work done on it already, and I'm doing a lot of research. And when I get up to 1983, I'll be coming in on Don Cleese's book to add to my research. So we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Thank you all so much for joining us again for another episode of Modern Musicology. We'll be back sometime soon, 2 weeks from now, and we have no idea what our topic's going to be, but we will figure it out before then. So everybody, have a great time. Have a great 2026, and we will see you next time.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping for the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.